Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the World Habitat Day celebrations in New York, post-pandemic cities. It is a pleasure to welcome all of you, distinguished guests, honorable permanent representatives. I am encouraged by the opportunity to host this event together with the American Institute of Architects, New York chapter and national, as well as the Consortium for Sustainable Urbanization, and my colleagues in the United Nations system. Today, we will have an event that takes place in several segments. The first segment, or opening segment, will be with a number of representatives from the United Nations system and permanent missions to the United Nations here in New York. I would like to welcome the following speakers. We will first hear from a message from the Secretary General, as well as an address from our Executive Director, Maimouna Sharif. This will be followed by remarks from the permanent representative of the Republic, Michael Milnar, followed by a presentation from Susan Mwangi, charge d'affaires, and acting permanent representative of the Kenya mission, and Amal Moudawalali, the permanent representative of Lebanon to the UN here in New York. These presentations will be followed by representatives from the American Institute of Architects, in particular Jane Frederick, the president of the American Institute of Architects at the national level, and Kim Yao, the American Institute of Architects in New York chapter. The session will be concluded by an intervention by Lance Brown, president of the Consortium for Sustainable Urbanization. I look forward to moderating this opening session, and just a slight correction based on my notes, Naomi and Tina, if you can please correct. The first speaker after the executive director would be Honorable Susan Mwangi, followed by Amal Moudawalali, followed by Michael Milnar. Is that correct? Over. We will assume so. Yes, that's correct. Thank you. We will assume so. With that, ladies and gentlemen, please can I request the introduction of the Secretary General's remarks by video message. Thank you.
Each year, World Habitat Day focuses attention on the state of the world's towns and cities. This year's observance highlights the centrality of housing as a driver for sustainable urban development. Currently, 1 billion people live in overcrowded settlements with inadequate housing. By 2030, that number will rise to 1.6 billion. Action is needed now to provide low-income families and vulnerable populations with affordable housing, with security of tenure, and easy access to water, sanitation, transport, and other basic services. To meet global demand, more than 96,000 housing units will need to be completed every day, and they must be part of the green transition. The urgency of improving living conditions has been brought to the fore by COVID-19, which has devastated the lives of millions in cities. Access to clean water and sanitation, along with social distancing, are key responses to the pandemic. Yet, in slums, it has proved difficult to implement these measures. This means an increased risk of infection, not only within slums, but in all cities, many of which are largely serviced by low-income, informal sector workers living in informal settlements. On World Habitat Day, in this crucial decade of action to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, I call for heightened efforts to promote the partnerships, pro-poor policies, and regulations needed to improve housing in cities. As we strive to overcome the pandemic, address the fragilities and inequalities it has exposed, and combat climate change, now is the time to harness the transformative potential of urbanization for the benefit of people and planet. Each year.
Thank you very much. Have we finished the video? I just saw it was a bit cut off. Is that finished?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Tina. I now have the honor to welcome the Executive Director and Undersecretary of UN Habitat, Maimouna Sharif, who has had a whirlwind World Habitat Day celebrating over the course of 24 hours. And we are thankfully happy to have her with us here to close per day in World Habitat Day. Honorable Executive Director, over to you. Thank you.
Very much, Chris. Honorable Permanent Representative to the United Nations in New York, professional architects and planners, distinguished academics and futurists, participating colleagues throughout the United Nations systems, participants from around the world joining us online, colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen. It gave me a great pleasure to welcome you to the 2020 World Habitat Day celebration in New York under the theme of Housing for All, a Better Urban Future. Today, we take an opportunity to reflect on the state of towns and cities and on the basic right for all to adequate shelter. We are also reminded that we all have the power and the responsibility to shape the future of our cities and towns. Later in today's program, you will see a glimpse of the Housing for All campaign, which calls for actions to improve housing conditions around the world. This year, we are celebrating World Habitat Day virtually around the world in over 50 locations. In these various events, we have celebrated World Habitat Day in different ways. However, a common element in all the sessions is COVID-19 and its implications for cities and urban development. This is certainly the case at the event here in New York entitled Post-Pandemic Cities. Since mid-March, we have all been gripped by the pandemic. At UN Habitat, we acted swiftly by repurposing USD 1.3 million to support COVID-19 responses in 13 countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Through this initiative and additional funding from the United Nations system, we supported efforts by governments to adapt health responses to informal settlements and slums, and managed to support 2 million people through youth-led hand-washing stations, among other initiatives. We are working with 64 countries around the world to implement UN Habitat's COVID-19 response plan, which is still ongoing. As a contributor to the wider United Nations system-wide action, UN Habitat worked closely with World Health Organization on the health response and with OCHA and the Interagency Standing Committee on Humanitarian Response. We also led the work stream on social cohesion and resilient communities of the United Nations framework for immediate social and economic response to the pandemic. Importantly, UN Habitat led an interagency process to prepare the Secretary General's policy brief titled COVID-19 in an Urban World. As we just heard from the Secretary General in his address, over 90% of COVID-19 cases occurred in urban areas, and effort to live with pandemics will be tied to the future of cities. We have taken seriously this question of post-pandemic cities, not only in our immediate response, but also in our thinking. UN Habitat is currently preparing a report that will be launched later this year on the future state of cities in a world with pandemics. This will consider the implications of pandemics for cities. Specifically, it will examine the role of the state and local governments in equality, urban form, public health, and urban economy and finance. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no doubt that the pandemic has and will continue to challenge our assumptions about urban development. I am therefore grateful to the panelists of the World Habitat Day celebration in New York for their insight and advice moving forward. Thank you to the ambassadors of Lebanon, Slovak Republic, and Kenya, Amal, Mikhail, and Nyambi. It is great to have you with us here today. Shukar Dekaju Asante. Thank you, leaders and of the American Institute of Architects and Consortium for Sustainable Urbanization, Jane, Kim, Lance, and Aliye. Thanks for organizing this event with the United Nations. Thank you, respective keynote speaker, Peter and Jeff. I look forward to learning from you today. And Excellencies, friends, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, and other panelists and participants online, thanks for your active engagement in the World Habitat Day 2020. Thank you very much. Over to you, Chris.
Celebrated around the world. I now turn to Ambassador Michael Milnar, the permanent representative of the Slovak Republic of the United Nations to New York. Ambassador, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning to everybody. Sincere greetings. Apologies for joining the conversation a little bit later due to other commitments that I had. It's a great honor and privilege to be able to say a few words in this important event, and happy World Habitat Day to you all. Cities are at the center of this pandemic. That is probably an understatement, as they have always been during many pandemics in our history. We had or still have a chance to see how our city we live in right now is changing. New York, where we are as a center of culture and home for more than 10 million people, has also been struck heavily and has been changing every day. From empty subway, vacant streets, closed restaurants, to no traffic jams. Of course, there might be some other important challenges involved. Question arises, will cities survive the coronavirus? I think they will. In fact, history shows that people often moved to cities after pandemics because of better job opportunities and the higher wages they offered after the sudden drop in population. The crisis may provide a short window for our unaffordable, hyper-gentrified cities to reset and to re-energize their creative scenes. So I hope that despite the challenges that we are going through right now, there will also be opportunities that can arise, or that we can turn the challenges into opportunities, maybe of different natures. The number of people living in urban areas has grown more than fivefold since the 1950s. Today, half of the world's population lives in cities, and this percentage will continue growing, as you know. Implications of such urban mushrooming have direct impact on the health and well-being of our people, our economies, and our planet. The projected increase of 2.5 billion people moving to cities over the next 3 decades will be extraordinary challenge that we will have to face. Cities already account for 70% of greenhouse gas emissions, and globally approximately 1/3 of the food that is produced annually is wasted. These are just additional challenges that we need to continue addressing alongside extensive traffic and waste production, just to add to the picture that we have in front of us. The way in which we design and build our cities will be critical in the near future, and it will even be more critical after the pandemic. And this is where the role of UN Habitat as the principal UN agency focused on urbanizations is irreplaceable for sure. It has to be managed in an inclusive and resource efficient way. Inclusiveness and local action are really key elements that I also would like to highlight as key enablers that need to be addressed. 95% of urban expansion in the next decades is foreseen to take place in developing world. It is important to highlight that youth has to be involved in these processes in a meaningful and substantial way from the outset. Some aspects of our cities and metropolitan areas will be reshaped depending on how long the current pandemic lasts. Fear of density and of subways or trains in particular, plus a desire for safer, more private surroundings may pull some towards the suburbs and rural areas. That's another challenge that we are already facing and that will probably be even further exacerbated. In conclusion, let me also emphasize that the pandemic is exposing the quality of governance and scale of inequalities in our global cities. What we need to do at this point is to look what has been working and what is potentially not working and take lessons from the field and from our various practical experiences. So I believe this is a unique opportunity to build back better. And I would like to very much invite you all to join forces together with UN Habitat and with all the other important actors to just do that thing for the collective benefit of us all. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. It's terrific to have you with us, and very much appreciate your support and especially your insights. Helpful to hear your views on how housing and urban development moves forward with the pandemic, and particularly the role of UN Habitat in supporting that. Thank you. We now move to Ambassador Susan Mwangi, the charge d'affaires of the permanent mission of Kenya to the United Nations in New York, and she's the ad interim permanent representative. Susan, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. So, UN Habitat, Ms. Manukuta Sharif, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to join you and to represent Kenya in this virtual celebration of World Habitat Day. It's a key event of Urban October, being celebrated worldwide in partnership with UN Habitat. I wish to congratulate UN Habitat for the successful organization of Urban October events despite the global COVID pandemic. Discussion on post-pandemic cities is indeed timely and strategic. The centricity nature of COVID-19 demands rethinking and re-engineering around housing for all, a better urban future in current COVID-19 responses and post-COVID recovery. Undoubtedly, partnerships and multilateral cooperation which leverages on the United Nations system and on specialized UN programs in particular is fundamental. Distinguished guests, Kenya's response to the COVID-19 pandemic has been multi-pronged and has harnessed collaborative efforts and interventions that involve public and private sectors, civil society, and UN programs and agencies. They include the formation of a government rapid COVID-19 response unit for seamless coordination and management across all government levels, 47 sub-national governments, institutions, partners, and the private sector. Lockdown measures that include curfew and cessation of international travel, restriction of movement from COVID-19-centric hotspot areas, protocols on social distancing, wearing of masks, hand wash stations, ban on social gatherings, closure of learning institutions and spacing in public transport vehicles. There's also state-led interventions which include disbursement of $1 billion Kenya shillings from the Universal Health Coverage Kitty towards the recruitment of additional health workers, PPEs, and training to support mitigation against COVID-19. The government is also providing tax incentives and reduction and lowered cash reserve ratio to increase liquidity ratio and loans to cushion businesses, especially SMEs, as well as direct cash transfers to persons in vulnerable situations. There's also an initiative dubbed Kazi Mtaani, which is the conceptualization and implementation of the National Hygiene Program and utilizes labor-intensive approaches to create sustainable public goods in the urban development sector. Residents from informal settlements, especially the youth, are recruited to undertake projects concentrated in and around informal settlements with the aim of improving the environment, service delivery, infrastructure, and providing income generation opportunities. Ladies and gentlemen, response and recovery from COVID-19 demands building back better, including through sustainable urbanization, human settlements, and a resilient environment for nature and people. We must in partnership plan, design, fund, and implement to create conducive, healthy, resilient communities and cities where lives and livelihoods thrive. In May 2020, President Uhuru Kenyatta launched a $534 million economic stimulus package in partnership with UN Habitat towards a COVID-19 response plan. This COVID-19 fund has enabled Kenya to access an extensive humanitarian resource base and contacts with humanitarian partners through interagency standing committees. In addition, the affordable housing agenda has also picked momentum and remains front and center to Kenya's post-COVID recovery. In the case of post-pandemic cities, there are lessons from the Nairobi Metropolitan Services, NMS, which has leveraged on COVID-19 pandemic to build back better through responsive and improved service delivery in informal settlements, towns, and cities since March 2020. These NMS programs include slum upgrading and road networks for all nine informal settlements in Nairobi, provision of potable water, protection of the environment through enforcement of into Nairobi rivers, and identification of green spaces in partnership with UN Habitat and the academia. Implementation of special planning zones and solid waste management, construction of water and sewage trunk systems ahead of the construction of affordable housing, rehabilitation of the Nairobi riverfront, upgrading and construction of 24 hospitals which are expected to be fully operational by December 2020, street lighting and construction of ablution blocks and parking spaces in 28 markets is ongoing. On urban mobility, public transport stations, public stations are being built on the outskirts of the CBD and include commuter rail trains, which have been procured to facilitate efficient and affordable public transport in the county of Nairobi. The government is also mobilizing resources for possible piping of water for distribution in informal settlements. Excellencies, distinguished guests, it is clear that building back better post-pandemic communities and cities will require visionary leadership, courage, partnerships, and determination to do things differently. Doing things differently inform the development of initiatives by the Kenya-Turkey Co-led Track on Infrastructure, Climate, and Local Action, ICLA, of the Secretary General's 2019 Climate Action Summit. The implementation of Building Climate Resilience of the Urban Poor, the BCRUP initiative, which Kenya committed to champion, will lead to improved lives and livelihoods for an estimated 600 million to $1 billion and will require political commitment and collaboration among stakeholders. And this must characterize post-COVID pandemic initiatives at the national, regional, and multilateral levels. We reiterate the call by His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta during his UNGA speech during the high-level segment that there is urgent need to better fund and strengthen UN Habitat and UNEP to enable them to deliver better post-COVID-19 recovery. Kenya, as host country to UNEP, UN Habitat, and the United Nations at Nairobi, remains committed to facilitate a conducive environment for UNEP and UN Habitat in Nairobi. And as I conclude, I would like us to remember that COVID-19 has adversely impacted both the rich and poor, and has highlighted the central role of partnerships across all sectors and between the North and South, as no country can do it alone. Let us leverage these immense opportunities for collaborations to build back better collaboratively and inclusively. I thank you. Asanteni.
Thank you very much, Susan Mwangi. It's very nice to hear from you, and we really appreciate the support from the government of Kenya as the host of the United Nations Human Settlements Program in Nairobi, and your active support together with Ambassador Njambi in enabling UN Habitat to be more effective, both in the governance structure as well as here in New York. Thank you. I now turn to Ambassador Amal Mudalali, the permanent representative of Lebanon to the United Nations here in New York. Ambassador, over to you.
Hello, can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm sorry. Dear Secretary General, Mr. Guterres, dear UN Habitat Executive Director, Ms. Maimouna Sharif, Excellencies, it's a great honor and pleasure to be part of this panel on post-pandemic cities with an important theme of housing for all, a better urban future. Thanks for UN Habitat for organizing this important panel. It's very critical to start preparing now during this pandemic for what kind of cities we want and what should be our priorities in building after this pandemic. Lebanon is grateful for including us in this panel because our challenges preceded the pandemic and became more severe with devastating consequences for its people after the August 4 Beirut explosion. We have now a triple crisis. Financial crisis, COVID-19 pandemic, and the Beirut explosion. As you all know, when the explosion ripped at the heart of Beirut, shattering lives and livelihoods, the Lebanese were reeling under the heavy weight of these crises. The rapid and effective response of the whole UN system was exemplary, from help with emergency relief to recovery and help with restoration of critical services and helping people pick up not the shattered glass that covered the face of the city, but also to put their lives together. UN Habitat was there from the first moments of the response. We thank you for that. Immediately after the explosion, UN Habitat deployed technical teams to the municipalities of Beirut and Burj Hamoud, the most impacted by the explosion. They helped with rapid building level damage assessments, digitizing and data, and producing 2 reports on the degree of damage incurred in both municipalities, which helps target the most impacted areas. This is in addition to a socioeconomic mapping, which is helpful in identifying the most vulnerable. UN Habitat also provided a cash for rent for 800 families whose houses were damaged by the explosion. This, we are told, will be complemented by protection and health awareness, and UN Habitat is co-leading the shelter sector response to the blast and co-chairing a housing and property technical committee. Unfortunately, many schools were damaged during the explosion, and we are grateful that UN Habitat is working on assessments of 100 plus private schools. The area most affected, the old center of Beirut, is the historic heart of Beirut, and the historic and heritage buildings that the memory of Beirut and its history are damaged or destroyed. We commend UN Habitat for engaging with the other UN partners to develop an urban recovery framework that was used in other conflict areas like Syria and Yemen to ensure an area-based approach to recovery, engaging at the community level and ensuring connectivity across neighborhoods. The most important part of this approach is that it goes beyond addressing the blast and its aftermath. It addresses the pre-existing complex urban challenges faced in Beirut, addressing heritage, housing, building back better, making environmental and social aspects an important component of the rebuilding. UN Habitat is also engaged fully with the 3RF strategy, reform, recovery, and reconstruction, which is undertaken by the United Nations, the World Bank, and the EU. This is in addition to its help in the COVID-19 response. Mr. President, we have been told that Beirut was destroyed and rebuilt seven times in its history, showcasing the resilience of the Lebanese. The explosion amplified the existing problems of the city of Beirut, and it's important when rebuilding the city to rebuild better, because the way you rebuild the heart of a city will determine how healthy the rest of the city and the country will be. People have to be at the center of the rebuilding, which ensures an inclusive, smart, and sustainable future for the city and its inhabitants. We need to build also in a way to preserve the memory of the city and its heritage and make it accessible and affordable to all. People are suffering financially, and replacing one window in Beirut costs more than the monthly minimum wage of a poor family. The cost of basic materials needed to rebuild homes and businesses is out of reach for thousands of people. They need assistance, not only to rebuild their homes, but more importantly, to rebuild their shattered lives. The role of UN Habitat and the UN system is critical here to help guide the strategy of rebuilding better, even in situations of extreme difficulties. Derek Thompson wrote in the Atlantic magazine that the 21st century city is the child of catastrophe, that natural and man-made cities and our ideas about human progress for millennia, that visionary responses to catastrophes have changed city life for the better. Beirut is not new to rising after disasters. It will rise again, but how it rises and with whom is critical to the future of the city and its people. We count on you to be with us, and we walk this path to rebuild a better city and a more sustainable and humane city and world. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Mudalali, for your kind words and profound thoughts in terms of how we move forward in cities in the context of disasters of multiple forms, not confined to explosions as experienced in Beirut, but challenges of inequality, economic development, and transformation. I now turn to the president of the American Institute of Architects, Jane Frederick. Over to you, Jane. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you to all across the nation and around the world for joining this vital discussion. We each have a unique role to play in creating a world that is more sustainable and equitable. For my organization, that means transforming the built environment through holistic solutions to fight climate change and create the safe, healthy community everyone deserves. AIA has a number of tools and programs to do that. We just updated our AIA Framework for Design Excellence, a resource with tools and strategies to pursue a built environment that's zero carbon, equitable, resilient, and healthy. One of the ways the building community can turn the framework into measurable action is through our 2030 commitment. The 2030 commitment is a platform for architects, engineers, and owners to work toward together to achieving a carbon neutral built environment by the year 2030. We just released the latest numbers from 2019, and it was our best year yet. A record 682 architecture firms representing over 100 countries participated last year, and signatories recorded a 49% reduction in predicted energy use intensity. That's the greatest reduction in the program's history, the equivalent of avoiding 20 million metric tons of carbon dioxide emissions. As we focus on post-pandemic cities today, it's important to realize just how much climate progress we can achieve through green design. As much as 50% of a city's greenhouse gas emissions can be produced by fewer than 5% of that city's buildings. Of course, we also know that climate and health are connected, and that crises in both realms hit our most vulnerable communities the hardest. As the world focuses on adapting the built environment to stop the spread of coronavirus, we have an unprecedented opportunity to aim bigger and adapt our communities to achieve lasting change. The most effective changes are those driven by local communities themselves. That fact is at the heart of AIA's Center for Communities by Design. This initiative has been helping communities design a better future for more than 50 years, pairing volunteer teams of experts with local residents. Together, we find design solutions to tackle challenges like zoning, affordable housing, revitalization, historic preservation, and of course, climate-related challenges like disaster recovery, resilient design, and sustainable communities. All communities need and deserve spaces that are healthy, equitable, and safe. We've seen growing public recognition of that truth, first through the COVID crisis, and then through the largest civil rights demonstrations in decades. We'll only overcome these multifaceted global challenges by joining forces to implement multi-pronged solutions. Working together, I'm confident we'll succeed in achieving meaningful, lasting change.
Very much, Jane Frederick. It's terrific to hear your intervention at the level of the American Institute of Architects and the efforts that you are taking as professional associations to move forward this agenda. And I think it complements very nicely the interventions we heard from the permanent representatives in the UN system here. I'm now going to shift to Kim Yao, who is head of the New York chapter of the American Institute of Architects, close to home here in the United Nations. Over to you, Kim.
Thank you very much, Chris. The almost 6,000 members of the American Institute of Architects New York City chapter share the city of New York with the United Nations. We applaud that the United Nations is addressing critical issues facing the world today. Thank you for convening for this important discussion. Back in 2019, New York was entering a decade already defined by extremes, with accelerating ecological, economic, and political crises. The 2020 arrival of COVID-19 to the United States has further revealed widening gaps of equity and access in our communities. The crises and challenges that face New Yorkers, natural disaster, climate change, threats to public health, require the attention of the public in general and design professionals more specifically. Architecture is fundamentally an interdisciplinary and collaborative field where design thinking and broad engagement yield spaces that improve the daily lives of people. Can the pandemic be a catalyst for our profession to embrace the challenge of making cities denser, healthier, and more sustainable? How will we meaningfully gather as communities, and what are the implications for our conception of public space? In city, we are galvanized around these questions. The Unified Task Force of AIA New York and AIA New York State formed immediately in the wake of the pandemic to partner with city and state officials in facing public health, climate resilience, housing, and equity challenges. Our design corps is partnered with New York City by Design and the New York City Economic Development Corporation to connect restaurant owners with design professionals who can assist with ongoing reopening plans. Our virtual exhibit, Visualize NYC 2021, uses research, data analysis, and visualization to explore pressing questions for our city, with a focus on the evolving public realm, a fundamental right to housing, climate change and resilience, and public health. These research areas directly intersect UN Sustainable Development Goal number 11, to make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. We will visualize NYC 2021 as a tool for broader civic engagement by asking visitors for feedback on these issues, in turn informing our advocacy work and priorities for 2021. This is critical strategic importance given the current significant economic downturn that will challenge the city to create meaningful change with restricted resources. As cities continue to densify and environmental pressure down, how do we evolve our thinking to make the future city more adaptable and resilient? While we cannot control the crises that we face, we can thoughtfully work on planning, anticipating, and creating our better future city, and we look forward to engaging in this work together with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kim, and it's great to hear that you were directly involved in supporting the City of New York and the State of New York on behalf of the architectural community in response to COVID. And I think this kind of collaboration between professionals and government is encouraging. I now turn to Lance Brown, the president of the Consortium for Sustainable Urbanization, and I refer to him in this meeting as the architect of architects, helping to manage and organize this event. Lance, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Good morning to everyone. My name is Lance J. Brown. I'm the president of the Consortium for Sustainable Urbanization, partners with United Nations Habitat, and co-organizers of today's program. We're truly honored to have this program introduced by the President of the United Nations General Assembly, the Executive Director of UN Habitat, and the permanent representatives from Lebanon, Slovakia, and Kenya, as well as our presidents of the American Institute of Architects. This is an important time for the UN as we celebrate its 75th anniversary. It is the one forum where 193 world nations come together to improve the quality of life for us all. We congratulate them during this most important year and look forward to continuing to work together. We are also pleased to announce, in celebration of the 75th anniversary, our CSU publication entitled Sustainable Urbanization at the United Nations for Architects and Design Professionals, written by founding board member Alia Pichelik and currently available on our website, no charge. We want to thank the president of the National AIA and the local chapter for insights they delivered on how design professionals pursue our health, safety, and welfare on the global, national, and local levels, and how these pursuits will determine the quality of life to which we aspire, from our public landscape to our health and educational institutions and our communities and residences. We depend on the talent, skills, and abilities and commitment of the design professionals to deliver affordable, energy-conscious, resilient, and yes, beautiful environments. We also want to thank today's keynote and panel speakers for sharing their thoughts about the ways we can best move forward in our post-pandemic world. We're experiencing a confluence of related challenges beyond anything seen by humankind. The CSU has endeavored to fully engage the design communities in the SDGs, especially SDG 11, in all of our activities. It's our hope that during the course of today's presentations and discussions, we will all add to our arsenal of positive responses to the many challenges we face. While daunting, we hope that we can meet these challenges with the optimism and hope that defines us, and with the courage and capacity and creativity we have exhibited throughout our history. We have serious choices ahead. We hope we will make the right decisions informed by shared, transparent, scientific knowledge and the equitable use of resources that will ensure our well-being for generations to come. I would like to close by reminding us all that we will have a CSU inaugural lecture by Champion awardee Claire Weiss entitled Millennium Thinking this Wednesday. Please register on our website. Please now welcome back Chris Williams. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Lance, and thank you for your collaboration in pulling this meeting together. I just will put a footnote to listeners who are perhaps newer to the Consortium on Sustainable Urbanization than others. They have been able to recently join the Habitat Professionals Forum, which is comprised of professional architects, planners, realtors from around the world as a key constituent of the New Urban Agenda. And UN Habitat has been working actively since the establishment of the United Nations Habitat Assembly in May of 2019 to revisit and strengthen the various constituencies of the New Urban Agenda, of which professionals are extremely important. So thank you, Lance, for your efforts and this meeting and broader efforts within the professionals, among the professionals.